Okay, so welcome back. Right now we're discussing our character concepts, what inspired them, and how we can flesh them out. The way
Mhm.
that this was the way this was constructed was I put down a series of templates, and the players each chose a specific background and a specific race. And having formed that, we're now talking about putting the flesh and the meat to turn them into actual characters. So, Pius, would you like to talk a little bit about Corvus and where he is, what he does, and if you have figured out who he is yet?
Yeah, sure. I really haven't figured out anything. He kind of suffers from the same flaw that a lot of my characters do. And generally, what will happen when I make a character that I'm passionate about, I will have the idea because I'm considering, I'm considering like the scenario that they're playing, or the system, or the lore, and something will just naturally sprout from that. But when I purpose make a character, and this has happened before with like a Star Wars character that I created, several D&D characters I created for random campaigns that I don't know, I was just sort of milk toast about being a part of. But every time I make a character simply to play a game, it's always a struggle to figure out what I want to even do with them. And because of that, it becomes a struggle to enjoy playing them because I don't know who they are. I don't know how to interface with the world through I guess, the medium of their personality, because I don't know what their personality is. They're just sort of there. They're purely mechanical, and I more or less just have to throw stuff at the wall until something sticks in order to actually get them to feel like a character to me. Otherwise, it's just inputs, endless inputs, and there is nothing more boring than nothing but inputs.
I think that this is actually a rather common problem. I've had similar characters, and when it comes to creating a character, sometimes I will build mechanically like you do, and then have to graft a personality. Other times I will have the spark of a personality. Usually it'll be a cross between them, but I often find that the core concept that I have for a character immediately dies the second it engages with other characters because of the dynamic. And so I wonder if having more interaction would help flesh out Corvus and what he likes. After all, this is essentially a treasure hunt. Because if you remember Sildar, having hired you guys, each of you know Sildar in a personal or professional way, and he's offered to set you guys up for life with your grandchildren's children still being fabulously wealthy. If it is, as everything he hopes it will be, working out.
I think the main thing that I need to do is to try and get more invested in the lore and the story of what we're doing because that's generally what spawns a good character. Uh, like some of the best characters that I've created came from random thoughts that I had that I just built on because I was purpose building them for a system, but that system immediately captured my interest. And like it's one of those things where it's like if I like something, that's not necessarily the same as it capturing that spark. And I don't know. I think I just need to figure out a way to capture that spark for this and for the other projects that we got going on because it's just not flowing naturally. So I need to prime the pump.
Yes, that's
So
definitely
I
tricky.
think I think in character like interaction would help, but I don't know. I need to think about what kind of character he is when I'm not on the clock, so to speak. Like when I'm literally on the clock at my job. Whenever I'm not role playing, it's something that I should give a little bit of thought because when I'm in a different state of mind, it's a little bit easier just because it's more passive and there's not as much pressure to come up with stuff.
Well, I think this is probably a good opportunity to explain a little bit about the setting, or at least the alterations. So as you know, it is set in Dungeons and Dragons, Faerun, the Forgotten Realms, technically, but we have altered things, particularly when it comes to firearms. Now, in the canon, firearms do exist, but we have moved technology forwards. So you've got more of a frontier mentality. So you've got some stockades, you've got muskets. We don't have rifles yet. I believe that we agreed on flintlocks.
Yeah.
So the idea is that about 10, 15 years ago, there was a big war, and a lot of people got conscripted and a lot of people died. And the result of that was some people were war profiteering, but most people basically saw the economy crash and everything got a lot harder. So food became scarcer, and it's taken about the same amount of time to actually start to rebuild. And so people are beginning to break even now. But there's a lot of disgruntlement. And with the war, a lot of firearms were mass produced, which is why they're somewhat widespread. But at the same time, firearms have not been produced since then. It's been quite difficult to keep track of the gunpowder, of making gunpowder. Now, in canonical D&D, I believe that gunpowder doesn't quite exist, depending on the edition. I think they came up with something called smoke powder, some kind of magic stuff. But then you've got things like Spelljammer, which do have firearms. But regardless, for our setting, black powder, gunpowder, does exist. But
The
getting
kind of stuff that you make by peeing on a pile of leaves.
yes, I believe that was that the Swiss method or was it the French method?
I have no idea.
It's one of them, I believe. Anyway, so yes, getting the sulfur is a little tricky, but there are black powder depots, supplies, and so a lot of the outlying towns, they have a few rifles, muskets, a few muskets which have been left over from the war. And so when you find militia, they will generally be carrying around swords and also shields. Sometimes they might have a pistol, sometimes they might have a musket, but most people have reverted back to crossbows and longbows. And of course, for the orcs, many of whom live in tribes or clans, some of them living in the forest, some of them living in the mountains, some of them living in the hills, accessing black powder is quite difficult, and they prefer to use bows because a bow is a mark of skill. And it's not so much that they're primitive, so much as they prefer to see skill because they're more martially inclined, at least the warriors that you've met or will meet. And of course, you'll have those who are non-martially inclined, but as a rule, the cultures that they are in don't use crossbows. They don't use muskets. Now, you might find a few that do because they're breaking with culture, but by and large, the Orcish culture, they prefer skill at arms. And so it's a very champion-based culture. They'll challenge people to duels. And when I say people, I'm really talking about other orcs. And so they admire brawn, they admire brute strength. And drawing a bow and shooting an arrow requires brute strength, also accuracy. And so they're very much your classic warrior culture. They do have a sense of honor, but they're also, I don't want to say misunderstood exactly so much as humans don't necessarily understand orc perspective because the orcs don't sit down and explain it to them. Now, you might have a few humans living amongst the orcs, you might have a few orcs living amongst humans, but by and large, as a result of the war and those that got killed, tensions run rather high. So whenever anyone sees an orc, it's like, oh, orc invasion, let's stop them. On the other hand, the humans are also fragmented. But we also have the city of Neverwinter. The city of Neverwinter is going to be the main hub of humanity and also dwarves and elves. This particular edition of the Forgotten Realms, Homebrew modified edition. And so most of the campaign will take place in the town of Phandelver. And with the first session, you guys were at a dwarven excavation and you made your way down to the town of Leland. And then you're taking a giant goat train from Leland to Phandelver. And so events are going to happen in Phandalin. I don't want to throw any spoilers out there, but there will be factions, and each faction has its own lore. And so while most of you, I think all of you have actually been in Neverwinter, it's, how to put this? Neverwinter in this rendition is more like a Renaissance city, more like a Renaissance city state, say like one of the Italian city states during the Renaissance, obviously. And so you might get more of a musketeer vibe than you would ordinarily. But you also have armored lancers. There are certainly dragoons in place, but that's in Neverwinter, which is in the city. The rural towns of Phandalin and Leyland, they're more rugged frontier. So I don't know if that helps any.
A little bit.
Yeah, it's good to have a context.
I think what I really need to do is think more deeply about my overall character, if you know what I mean. Because they affect each other. Like one should be kind of a foil to the other.
Well, we certainly saw some of that today in our simulation of combat, because Isaac was acting literally as a shield man, and he was dropping shields for you, and you were acting as the point man, or the vanguard, as the quick heavy striker. I guess you could say that you were storming the enemy, so to speak.
Yeah. I think that I'm going to switch up the play style a little bit. Not necessarily going for like the straightforward attack, like the French method of World War One. I think I want to play him a little bit more defensively. Not to say that he'd be like a shield man or anything, but one that would be a bit more likely to draw their enemies out rather than going to them, you know?
Yes. And I mean, using stealth to sneak up on people is certainly going to be an option. You're not always going to encounter people openly in the field. Sometimes you will, but not all the time. There should be opportunities to bait and draw and lay traps and draw people into minefields.
I'm not even talking about that necessarily. I'm talking more from like a fencing standpoint, for instance. Like if he's going to engage people up close, he'd probably be a little bit more defensive. No, I don't think he should continue being the type to offer preemptive strikes. Because I do have a little bit of an idea of what his personality ought to be. And I don't think that really aligns. He's a privateer, so he's a profiteer. He is likely going to be a little bit more cautious and a bit less reckless with how he does things.
Well, I will say that if you guys continue to use lethal damage, then those that you fight will likely return that lethal damage.
I will defend our use of lethal damage. They attacked us for literally no reason.
Yeah. Oh yeah, those, but that was just the combat simulator. I'm just saying in the campaign.
Yes.
Overall, we're not going to be that violent, probably. At least my character isn't.
What about you, Peter? How does your character feel about the use of lethal magic, bearing in mind that the MO of the orcs is to take prisoners and sell them into slavery?
I think my character would want a speedy result from his spells. Granted, like you said, like places we're at, they're either Renaissance or they're medieval, but spell casting is rarer. And as you also said, the meta magic, like some will have it, but not all of them will have it. So with my spells, what I would hope to do is use my meta magic for a very swift delivery of the result. So if I need to use Conjure Barrage to knock out the orcs with pebbles, or if I need them to blind them like with firecrackers or something like that, I would want to either heighten it. I would want them to, or I would want to heighten it if I wanted to kill them. I would want to just use it normally, and if it kills some of them, okay. But like a lethal damage should be specified every time, especially when with this glass cannon approach. I would hate to just leave it open ended because, like, again, what I love about this character is that his choices have like real consequences. It's not just try again. It's try, pray, succeeds. It's like a try, pray, act movement. I would hope the choice for lethal damage would be one that is followed through and not thrown around.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you see people using guns, that's probably going to be for lethal damage, because as far as I'm aware, you can't declare non-lethal damage with a bullet from a gun. However, that's not going to be true of everything, and so the world will be reacting as well as acting. So just because some people choose to use lethal damage on you, it doesn't mean that everybody will. And that may be people within the same faction, because there will be different personalities. And I think you raise a very good point about the rarity of magic and meta magic, because there are a few spellcasters which I've written into the campaign, or rather rewritten, I should say, since it is abridged. And they each have their own quirks and their own way of magic. And it's interesting that both you and Isaac took the Conjure Barrage spell. I'm also aware that you guys should be wearing some form of armor, and I think that that's something that we're going to have to revisit before session 2, just to make sure that you are getting some kind of resistance, because one of the prevailing points of this is it seems to be whoever lands the initiative gains the decisive strike, unless you guys are behind cover, which again is interesting. So it should make it a little more tactical. So speaking of Isaac, how do you feel about your character and his personality?
Honestly, I'm just kind of still trying to figure that out. I am honestly kind of struggling with the same thing as Pius. Just I built the character, but didn't really have any passion behind it. So I'm just kind of trying to figure out really who he is.
So I'm going to throw this out for you guys. Will you have wanted to have met up before? Do you want to have some kind of party history? Is there anything that we could do to spark more personality and more interaction, a best dynamic? Because it doesn't have to be between all three of you, because I think that Peter might have more of a personality for his guy. Would that be a fair statement, Peter?
Yeah, I would hope I could bring I have brought and can continue to bring a more connected and expressive personality to the character.
Well, one of the things that I love about your character is his refusal to pronounce Sildar correctly, constantly saying Stildar.
Yep.
And I'm going to assume that he was just annoying people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most definitely. He was, especially from the first session when they're on the road and it's like, hey, Mip, come check this out. He's like, well, come on, we have to get on the road. It's like, all right, fine. Like, I've seen him before. He gets in these moods. It's like once every like few weeks or a few times, it'd be like, okay, he's in this mood, and we're going through the same song and dance. So, I will put up my walls and continue to burn the bridges again, and it's a very toxic but very comfortable cycle.
What I recall, you chose the noble and the runaway heir as your character.
I think so. It was the options were. Wait, it was. I don't have the 500 gold, which would have come with it. I have the spellcaster, I believe. So, but the one runaway heir, most definitely, heiress to be specific, I guess.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, mixing up the archetypes here. But yeah, so your character is something of a formerly pampered brat from the way you've been playing them.
Yes, very much a highborn character. But as he has grown, he's also realized he's been aware of how he has been, how he was raised, and how he reacts to it. And it's now what's fun for him is it's now a choice. Do I just revert back to my old, like more naturally, of my more natural upbringing, or do I choose to be a bigger man, choose to be a wiser man, as I've seen in Silgar, or in other people I've interacted with. At this point, he's very chaotic in his like, well, what do I feel like choosing right now? Do I feel like being a pompous, or do I take the higher road and choose to live as a humble servant or humble? I guess he wouldn't even know the word. He would just assume a good person is humble, and so his understanding of pride and humility is very out of whack.
Well, you chose a elf as your racial type. So not only are you a runaway heir, you're also an elf. So that must color your perception on being around humans and dwarves. And the way that I've set the setting up is humans, elves, and dwarves. Some of them get along, some of them don't. Some of them are more rural, some of them more urban. And so it just depends on the individual in question. But from the sound of it, um, I would imagine that yours is quite an urban city elf, who's run into the rural wilds to just get away.
Most definitely, he has a city boy bent to him, where he would run a block, he would run an area, a neighborhood, because he knows the businesses, he knows the right people. He grew up knowing and having a respect as he walked through the streets almost. And even if they didn't respect him, it was expected in his mind that they should respect him. So you like, just from this description, he can be a very unlikable character.
So Isaac, is there any
Yeah.
kind of background that you can share about your character? Where does he come from? What if you don't quite know what makes him tick yet, do you have any quirks or any habits or anything like that?
Uh, Honestly, not yet. I haven't really fleshed out his background. All I know is that sometimes he can be a little bit too cocky for his own good, but that hasn't really come up yet.
From what I remember, you said that he was a bounty hunter,
Yes.
so we'll have to work some of that into the story and the lore. So does he have any tall tales that he likes to tell, or is it just another job for him and he doesn't think about who he's capturing?
It's really just another job, honestly. He
Okay.
does boast of the time he fought a dragon once. He never actually says how it ended, but he says he fought one.
One does have to ask how old the dragon is, but maybe that will come up during conversation.
Who knows?
So, out of interest, Isaac, Peter, why is it that your characters want this treasure? Why are they helping Sildar?
I would say for mine, especially running away from his high society life and trying to find a purpose in his mind, a rather dark and dirty world. By obtaining this treasure, he would become a master of both worlds. He has now lived two lives that one he would never fathom of stepping into, and two, he would feel worthy enough to go back to his other way of living, knowing that he's seen the other side. So it's a justification for him, a goal in his mind of, if I can do this, then I'm worthy of where I was born from. But also, I could no longer wonder what it's like to be a peasant, to be someone who was less, who wasn't born with as many silver utensils in their mouth.
Okay, so, and this is kind of a spoiler, and I don't really want to ask this, but at the same time, I'm curious. Is there any genuine loyalty to Sildar?
The loyalty he has is purely for the experience and purely for the on his own understanding. He sees still Silgar as someone who can help him find that, and so he's grateful for that. But if there was a situation, say a missed opportunity, and there would be nothing to gain from it, he would really consider why he's doing this. And if I was to save him, if I was to continue to be loyal to him, if I wasn't to switch sides, like what would be the benefit of this? And it's not just monetary, it's also ethical and self-fulfilling. Like, he wouldn't sell him out to a bunch of orcs because the orcs offer him more money, but he would also consider whether it would be worthwhile going back and saving him if they already have the treasure. Like, he's not villainous in his understanding. He's more, okay, what's the best way to walk away with this without compromising too much morals, but I'll still having the best experience and takeaway as I can.
Okay, so he is basically someone that you can't trust.
Yeah, I wouldn't trust him with my wallet. I wouldn't really trust him with my beer either.
So that's going to create an interesting tension. So what about you, Isaac? We know that Pius's relationship to Sildar is purely professional, and as an ex-privateer, he needs to establish himself on the land. And Pius has had to step out. So what about you? What about your character? Where does his loyalties lie? What's his motivation for getting stupid amounts of wealth?
Well, that is a very good description of it. For Joe, I think it's definitely more of a life debt. He's not that interested in the gold, although it definitely doesn't hurt. As stated in the official session 1, he met Sildar in a cave of goblins when he got a bit in over his head. And by a bit, I mean he was very, very much in over his head. Stupid bounty having the wrong number of goblins. Either way, that's unimportant. So he kind of feels like he owes Sildar a life debt, and this is his way of paying him back.
So it sounds like we've got quite the mixed group of motivations. And what I find so fascinating about this is, in this particular rendition, Sildar is offering you guys a once in a lifetime chance, once in many lifetimes, actually, because if what he suspects is true, this isn't something that should just be shared out to just anyone. So there must be something that he sees in you. There must be some kind of connection between you guys that he can rely on, or at least call on. And it'll be interesting to see how this actually plays out in your actions, because if he's right, then he will have given you a chance that no one else would have. And he could have hired many people, but he called upon you. And so the fact that you're willing to abandon him, I think that says a great deal about your character, Peter. And it's going to be fascinating to see how that really unravels, because there may be a chance for you to abandon him, or maybe there won't be. So
yeah. And my character might not look for it. My character might, as if he becomes more of an annoyance, maybe this time in this cycle of like back and forth banter and disrespect, maybe this time it's like more than expected. And it's like, okay, what the heck? Do I really want to deal with this anymore?
yeah, and for you, Isaac, having a life debt is going to be interesting once that's been repaid. And I'm curious, what would that actually look like for Joe Mib? Would it simply be seeing this through to the end and then considering it quits, or would it be simply pushing him out of the way? At what point does he decide that the life debt is fulfilled?
That is to be determined so far. It would probably end when the mission is over, with either him getting a reward or something, because even though it is a life debt, he still has to put food on the table.
But hopefully that will never be a problem for your character again.
Yes, exactly.
But having said that, with Sildar being a man in his 50s and Sildar working with Gundren, and you guys having got to know Gundren a little bit over the course of the last few months, going from one expedition to another, excavation to another, and Gundren being full of stories and family honor, what does that actually do for your characters? Does it resonate with your runaway heir? Does he feel any kind of pangs towards family or clan, or is it simply that he doesn't care less, Peter?
It's an understanding in his mind. Yeah, I think also a false identity he pulls onto himself of the pain of his past, and then seeing them through the actions of this guy who's like brought them up and shown them a more moral and ethical understanding of how he can achieve this goal of his. And it's dangerous. It's something I've even fallen into, where your past dictates how you respond to your present, and it's not in a like wisdom way, it's in a painful trauma response, you know. So maybe Stilgar reminds him of the grueling tutors he's had to endure, and how they would just constantly like recite something and just be annoyed with him for no reason because he just wasn't smart enough, you know. Or
well, Sildar is a man of very, very few words, and he doesn't speak much, so he just gives a few orders. Gundren, the dwarf, is the one who tells these stories and runs his hand fondly over the statues and the architecture and talks about lost dreams and lost glory and so on. So there's definitely a contrast there. There's very much the straight man and the storyteller.
yes, yeah, most.
And so out of the two, which one does your character feel more drawn to, if either one of them?
I feel like he would be drawn more to the not I would hesitate to say romantic, but definitely the more poetic understanding and verbiage of the dwarf, because just like how we find beauty in poetry and pain and loss more than we find it in the mundane and the simple of life, I would say a man who would, a dwarf in this case, who would wax a little more lyrical would be would definitely be someone he would want to hang with more, someone he would want to resonate more. So this client that they're taking on. It's kind of interesting seeing and hearing that, but also not. He doesn't want to pry in too much, but he wants to understand so that he could then go out and have that experience, to have that romantic, that adventure.
Well, I mean, characters do develop over time, and so some things will change and some things won't. But it certainly sounds like a fascinating dynamic that he has, particularly being more attracted to the way the client says things and falling for the whole lost dreams of restored glory and whatnot. But how about you, Isaac? Out of the two of them, Sildar and Gund, the Rock Seeker, which one does Joe resonate more with?
Uh, Probably Sildar.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was expecting you to say. Well, that makes it fascinating. And so already we've got a divided party in terms of, shall we say, interest. It would be interesting also to see if, and this isn't planned, but if they were ever to come to blows, which side you guys would take. But I guess we'll find that out. We've talked about goals, we've talked about personalities, we've talked about relationships. I suppose the one thing that we haven't talked about is how they relate to each other. But I guess we're going to find that out. Okay, so just one quick question because it comes to mind. When it comes to magic, how do your characters feel? When it comes to the use of poisons or the use of guns, do they actually care which method is used to incapacitate or slay an enemy as long as it gets the job done? Or are they people who see poison as dishonorable? Do they see gunpowder as dishonorable? Do they see magic as dishonorable? So where do your characters stand on that?
Hmm.
Honestly, for Joe, it's basically, well, he's a bounty hunter. He does whatever gets the job done. If it's poison in a goblet of wine, then so be it. If it's a big fireball or something, so be it. If it gets the job done, it's accepted.
And I figured that's something that you would say, but out of curiosity, what's the difference for him between being a bounty hunter and an assassin? Where's the line? Is there a line?
There's not really a line there for him. Uh, I think he would say that the difference is he takes on a lot more exotic jobs because he is a jack of trades when it comes to bringing in or killing his targets. He could go from nobles to someone in the slums like that, whereas assassins would probably never stoop that low.
Well, it just depends who their target is, but certainly Flaming Shield with Conjure Barrage certainly begins to seem like it might be his signature move.
Quite possibly.
So I've gamed with you before, and I've seen you play a character who has juggled halflings.
Oh,
Would you
it's
say,
great fun.
oh, yes, would you say that each of your characters has something that is a unique signature move, something that makes them tick? I've also seen you play a gunslinger.
Uh, yeah, there's definitely one defining feature, but in just a maze of others when I really get into a character. And hopefully that will happen with Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. If the flaming shields isn't his thing. But having said that, I am curious because with bounties, and that's his target, I would imagine that most of the time it would be to bring them in alive. In terms of collateral damage, he doesn't really seem like he doesn't strike me as the type to particularly care. But then again, does he? Because causing collateral damage while he's on the job is not professional. So is it more a case of his professional ethics? Is it something else?
Uh, it's he definitely doesn't mind it, but he tries to avoid it if at all possible. So, like for example, in the bar, that they came after him. He was just doing what it took to survive. They set the shield on fire. He just used it to his advantage. Like it it would not have been his first idea to set his shield on fire and throw it, because it would risk burning the tavern down. But they were the ones who threw that Molotov, so he just rolled with it.
And I mean, you were the only one who tried to calm down the tavern keeper or innkeeper.
Yes. He definitely tries to take a charismatic, maybe, uh I don't know. I'll think of the word at like 3 a.m. tomorrow and be like, aha,
Yeah,
because
that
that's just
sounds
how it
about right.
goes.
Yes. It sounds like he does what he needs to do, and he doesn't do anything more than he has to.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, okay. So how about you, Peter? Is there anything that your character considers cowardly or despises when it comes to methods? What about collateral damage? How does he feel about poison or gunpowder or magic? Is it something that he considers it to be his right, almost like a divine right, because there's magic flowing through him and everybody else is worthless without it? Where does he stand?
I would say the biggest caveat he's always had is if there if he feels unworthy to use it, he won't use it. But if he feels that it is his right, then he will use it. But if he finds that this is an effective way to get a job done with the best result, with the best uh end goal being achieved. I think the biggest best tagline of this is he wants the best outcome. He wants the best outcome for it. The more I like speak out this character, I'm seeing how volatile he's being. This is a character who just wants to express himself.
Okay, so just before we go, this has sparked one more question that I'm curious about. Do either of your characters have any vices? And one other quick teaser question, and this is mostly for you, Peter, because Isaac, you kind of already know, so I don't want you answering this one because it will give away the game.
Aw, that's no fun.
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
So, question one. Have you given any further thought to the guy in the back of the cart? We reached Leyland, and then you guys joined the giant goat caravan. And the giant goat caravan is actually taken from Dragon of Icespire Peak. And there are three characters who introduce themselves. One of them was an elf. Elves are relatively rare, so she's there, and her name is Iverna Nightbreeze, or Iverna the Nightbreeze. And
Yeah.
then there was a chap named Pickled Pete, and I believe he was the driver of the other cart. And then there was I'm blanking on his name, but there was the young one there who was going with it.
And
And then there was the guy who didn't introduce himself, and he was lying in the back of the hay cart, the hay being there to feed the giant goats.
that's right. Did I give that guy, the guy in the back, any thought? Not really, no. He was as they sort of went off and I saw him, I I imagine my character would have written him off pretty um I guess you could say nonchalantly.
Talon, that was the name of the last one.
I see.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think he would have paid
No.
much mind. It's funny as well because I've made this character and I'm using wisdom as his spellcasting ability, and perception is one of his, like, he's proficient in it. So it's kind of interesting. It shows you that, like, as we grow in wisdom, as we grow on how we can be humble, kind, and caring for people, and again, like, genuinely desire that and genuinely feel that, we also can choose to just be blind. We can choose to just look the other way and not care. And it also shows our true intentions of, like, can we actually care, or are we just loving and being honest when it suits us? So he can be very perceptive, but he can also be very blind in the situation.
Yes, I think it's particularly telling how Iverna, the Night Breeze, took an instant dislike to him. So that's going to be interesting. But again, final question. Do either of your characters have any vices?
If he fumbles his words, it's because he wants to bargain. He wants to influence his way again, even though he doesn't really have any bargaining chips. He wants to still have the best outcome, even if he doesn't have all the means for it. So that's almost like self-denial. He's not seeing the bigger situation. He's still living in ideas of it while still trying to have an experience. It's like he's fighting with himself internally.
Well, with that, it does beg the question, does he actually trust anyone? Does he trust his party members?
He trusts them to do their job that he's seen them do 100 times over. So like with Silgar, with his fighting, with his, like, ability to get clients, he trusts that they'll be able to do that. But he wouldn't put his chips down. He wouldn't bet on a horse that he feels would turn out sourly.
Well,
And
given that the system is exceptionally lethal, Survivor Edition masochist, that's a very interesting place for him to be in.
I feel that. I'm looking forward to seeing where this guy will go.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that, Peter. How about you, Isaac? Does Joe Mib have any vices? And does he the group?
Probably it would be the promise of an exotic bounty. Just he lives, well, not exactly for the thrill of the hunt, but something close to it. Like, he's gone after people who have skipped bar tabs. He's gone after people who have tried to kill someone. He's put a lot of those in prison. But if there was something new, he would absolutely try to snatch it up. And it could be a trap, or it could be a genuine promise of fortune, or just bragging rights. But he would try to go after it.
That's interesting. So, how does he feel about being a member of a party? Because it sounds like each of you are used to working solo. Does he trust the others?
Kind of what Peter said, honestly. He trusts them to do their job, but he wouldn't hand them a pouch of gold.
It's very, very telling how we seem to have an array of anti-heroes, which again is kind of the tone that I set with the with the different backgrounds. None of them really are what you would call your lawful good paladin. There are a couple of options that they could have taken which could have led to that, but it's very, very telling just how individualistic each member of the party is. So it's going to be fun to see how that plays out. And when it comes around to our next campaign, or perhaps our next set of characters, do you think you guys are going to try for a classic lawful good chivalric knight, or are you going to continue to play sneaking through the shadows of morality?
Yeah, absolutely no on the paladin. For me, at least.
Yeah, but I see you play a fantastic lawful neutral.
Well, thank you.
How about you, Peter? And then we really must call it a night. Do you think that you'd want to try something dramatically different, a lawful good?
I think I would enjoy a character who would, instead of seeing how close he could get to the line, see how far away from the line he could get.
Yeah. So that does beg this one final question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How do you guys feel knowing that you only have one character with one life?
It just makes me want to protect it.
Makes me happy because it feels like this is a song of like loving something that you can't lose. You know, you don't love something that's disposable, that's constantly replaceable. You love something that has value to it. We like gold because it's a rare substance, and this character's life is very valuable to me.
Yes, scarcity definitely upped the stakes. And given how quickly you guys go down, it's going to be interesting to see how far you make it through the campaign. But say, for the sake of argument, there is a party wipe, total party kill. Everybody goes down, and all of you roll terribly in the jury table, and you guys actually die. Would you want to pick up with new characters from where you left off, or would you want to launch into a different campaign? And this question is kind of a spoiler. So, how do you feel about it? I know we've only just started.
That does beg an interesting question. Would like to just retry.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that it might be similar to one of those, shall we say, reset stories where you get one life and you can go so far and then you go back to the beginning. What would you do differently?
Yeah, definitely something similar.
Yes, save points. Of course, that could get really, really dull quickly. So we'll have to see.
I think I would factory reset because just like what makes this character so unique and so valuable, I would want to port that into another idea. I wouldn't want to try to make him again. I would want him to last for as long as he could and to have a good ending, even if it's a short one. I would. So if he was to die, and if there was to be a reset or a new character introduced, it would be under a new desire and a new goal.
Oh, that's interesting. And everybody else is just going to have to wait and see. And hopefully, our band of heroes, dubious heroes, anti-heroes, will make it through. But thank you for joining us, and we will see you guys next time. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to hear your thoughts, particularly in regards to how well you like the characters. Now you've heard a little bit more about them. There's been a bit more shared. Do let us know. We'll be hearing from you. Bye for now.